So to talk in terms of developing the idea of friction, so in the previous video, we talked about how friction acts between two objects. It's a function of the surfaces that are there in contact, and that the friction responds to the force that you apply. The larger the force you apply, the larger the force of friction. But then obviously at some point of time, the irregularities in the surface are going to break away, because these are tiny pieces that are sort of preventing each other from moving. And if you apply a sufficiently large force, you are going to be able to break those tiny pieces. Once those, hello, once those forces break through the irregularities, then your object starts to slide. So we come to another idea, which is that um, there is a certain amount of force that will be provided by friction when you attempt to move an object over another. That friction force maxes out at a certain point of time. That means it reaches a maximum value, and then the object breaks free and starts moving. So that friction is what we call in general as static friction. So the object is not moving, the two surfaces are not moving over each other at this point of time, but they are preventing the movement. Okay. Once the objects have broken through, then obviously one object can slide over the other objects. One surface can slide over the other surface, and there is friction there, and it will stop objects from continuing in its state of motion. But obviously, that friction is going to be less than the static friction. Okay, and that friction when objects are moving over one another is what is known as dynamic friction. Okay, again, if you want to understand the differences between the two, think in terms of the irregularities in the surfaces which are interlocked during static friction, and then break free and slide over each other in dynamic friction. And you will see why in general static friction is always going to be greater than dynamic friction. It's hard to get objects to move which have friction between them, but once you've got them moving, it's easier to keep them moving. And the example that we gave off was some sort of Vashist's fantasy, that a car upturns and is sliding along the road, and it has some static friction acting on it. And that static friction will eventually bring the automobile to a rest. So that is the sort of difference between static friction and dynamic friction.